name's Stephen J. Pemberton. I'm a writer based in Borehamwood. I'm a member of Writers in the Wood, the town's writers group. I mainly write fantasy and science fiction, and today I'm going to talk about writer's block and the methods I use to make sure it doesn't happen to me, or not often anyway. Writer's block is when you want to write but don't know what to write, or when you know what you want to write but don't know how to write it. In my experience, this is most often caused by the fear of writing something bad. It possibly goes back to your school days, where you often had time for only one attempt at something. But when you're writing for yourself, unless you're up against a deadline, you can take as long as you want. And it's much easier to create something that's roughly what you want and then refine it, than it is to write something that's exactly what you want on the first attempt. So do that. If you're afraid of writing badly, write badly. Or rather, write without any concern for whether you're writing well. You don't have to show it to anyone. After you've edited it, if you still think it's rubbish, you still don't have to show it to anyone. Though you probably should at some point, as that's one of the few ways you're likely to improve. Sometimes the reason you think it's bad is because you know what you wanted it to be, and you know where it fails to meet that ambition. But someone coming to it fresh doesn't know that, and can judge it only on its merits. If you know what should happen after the point in the story that you're stuck on, it's okay to leave yourself a note to come back here later and skip ahead. You don't have to write a story in the same order that the reader reads it. And you might find that the reason you were stuck on that part was that you didn't actually need it. I leave myself a lot of notes when I'm writing. If I'm not sure how to describe a thing or character, if I need to look something up or refer to something I wrote earlier, and I don't want to break the flow, or if I've given the characters a problem that I don't yet know how to have them solve. It saves a lot of time on the first draft, and sometimes when I edit, I end up deleting or rewriting those sections or paragraphs, which saves even more time. A tactic I sometimes use is to do something that requires me to use my hands or feet, or both, but doesn't need much concentration so that my mind's free to wander. I think this is why many writers say they get a lot of their ideas while they're in the shower or out for a walk. Sometimes it helps to introduce some elements outside your direct control. For instance, go somewhere that you're likely to see a lot of people you don't know, pick 3 people who aren't together, create characters based on them, and put them into a story. Another writers group that I'm in, PC Writers, has a monthly writing challenge. The leader has some dice with pictures instead of numbers. She rolls 3 of them, and the challenge then is to write a short story that features the 3 things that come up. Forcing yourself to find connections between things that deliberately aren't connected is good for creativity and conspiracy theories. Sometimes writer's block is your subconscious telling you that you made a bad decision earlier in the story. Try asking yourself, is there one thing I could change in what I've already written that would let me carry on? If there is, make a note of it and carry on writing as if you've already changed it. Don't change it now, unless it's very small, because it's easy to get dragged into a never-ending cycle of changing your mind about some detail, which makes it necessary to change something else, which makes it necessary to change some other thing, which makes... Sometimes the bad decision is something bigger than one detail. You might have started the story in the wrong place, or you might be telling the story from the point of view of the wrong character. One of my early stories, I had several attempts at it, and I didn't finish it until I realised that it mostly needed to be told from the point of view of someone who isn't in the earlier attempts. And it can be disheartening to have to scrap a lot of work, but sometimes you need to do that work in order to figure out that you don't need it after all. Sometimes you get the opposite problem from writer's block, which is that you have lots of ideas, but none of them fit with the story you're currently writing. What I do when that happens is write down the idea in enough detail that I'll still remember what it was about in 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years, and then carry on with the current story. Easier said than done sometimes, I know. When I've finished the first draft of the story, and I'm waiting to forget what I wrote so that I can edit it with fresh eyes, I'll look at any other ideas I wrote down and re-evaluate them. If they're genuinely good, they're still good for having had to wait a while. If they're actually not good, and I was just blinded by their shiny newness because I was bored with the other story, I've saved myself the few weeks or months I would have spent writing something that wasn't strong enough to carry a whole story. Writing down ideas as they come to you is another good way of beating writer's block. Something I wrote down 10 years ago might be a perfect fit for something I'm stuck on now. I used to fret a lot about writing down every idea that occurred to me, but nowadays I write down only the ones that really grab me. I've been doing this for over 25 years, and my worry now isn't that I'll run out of ideas, but that I won't live long enough to write them all. Even if an idea is really good, I don't worry about writing it down before I forget it, unless I think it'll fit into my current story. If it doesn't fit, then seeing as I mostly write novels, it'll probably be weeks or months before I can write something that uses it, and by then I'll have thought of at least one other idea that I like just as well, if not better. That leads neatly onto the piece I'd like to read, which is an extract from a book I'm working on at the moment. The initial idea came from a documentary I saw in 2016. I wrote the idea down, and it prompted a few more ideas and a few questions that I thought might lead to an interesting story, if I could only think of answers to them. I put it aside for a few years, then came back to it in 2020, thinking I could turn it into a short story, because I'm also working on a collection of those. I soon realised the story was too big for that, and I let it run. It bears little resemblance to the idea that came from the documentary, and that happens a lot with my stories, but I'm okay with it. My aim is to provide interesting and entertaining answers to interesting and entertaining questions, but I get to pick the questions. So, the story doesn't have a final title yet. It's science fiction, set a few hundred years in the future, on a colony in the asteroid belt. The main character, Sandra Macris, is an accident investigator who normally deals with faulty airlocks and dodgy life support systems. But in her current case, the captain of a mining ship called Gentoo has been accused of murdering one of her crew. She did it in a way that left apparently incontestable evidence of her guilt, but she insists she's been framed. Sandra's job, officially, is to find out whether the ship has any faults that contributed to the death, but the more she digs, the more confusing the picture becomes. Just before this scene starts, she receives a letter telling her to stop investigating, which makes matters even more ambiguous. Framing the captain would have taken a lot of time and money, but sending the letter was quick and cheap. Or is that just what they want her to think? Sandra reached the spaceport, put on a spacesuit, and launched in a runabout without incident. Outside she felt safer. There was nowhere to hide in space, and the higher off the ground they got, the more warning they'd have of someone trying to sneak up on them from over the horizon. As they neared Gentoo, Sandra asked the pilot to wait, seeing as she needed only a few minutes on board, but the pilot replied that she was already late for other jobs. In Gentoo's airlock module, Sandra said to the AI, "I'm looking for Captain Haldar's access token. Do you know where it is?" That was a stupid thing to ask a ship's AI. It already knew the location of every food canister, drill bit, and hair grip within the hull. "May I ask why you require that information?" Startled, Sandra bumped into the forward hatch. That was an odd way for an AI to say, "Request denied." "I'm an inspector with the HAIB. As such, I have command authority over this ship until my investigation into the death of Alejandro Jones is complete." There was a pause, such as might result from the AI requesting confirmation of her assertion from someone on the surface. "My apologies, Inspector. Captain Haldar's access token is in the officer's cabin, which is 2 hatches forward of your present position. I cannot give a more precise location, as I have no cameras in the cabin." It was odd to hear an AI apologize. But then, how often did an AI make a mistake like that? She opened the hatch. Lights came on as she pulled herself through into another cylindrical chamber. This was the communal area, almost empty now that all the furniture had been stowed. As she moved, Sandra kept thinking she could see someone from the corner of her eye. This was normal on an empty ship, but her worry over the note was making it worse. The next module had 2 cabins opposite one another, their doors labelled officer and crew. Only 2 people were normally out of hypersleep at the same time, and so that was how many cabins the ship provided. Anyone else who was awake had to make do with the communal area. Sandra opened the officer's door. Even allowing for the fact that the officers had removed anything they'd need while they were on Patroclus, the cabin resembled a low-budget hotel room. The only sign it had been lived in at all was the worn patch on the wall between the hooks for a sleeping bag. 5 storage compartments lined the rear wall. Sandra tried them from top to bottom. The first one was empty. In the second was a small crimson plastic box. In the third was an access token. The light on its top should have flashed red when Sandra took it, indicating that it didn't recognise her as its authorised user, but it remained dark. Perhaps it was faulty, or perhaps the token's battery had failed, though they were normally good for at least 10 years. The token had a narrow gap in the ridging into which Haldar's name had been laser-etched. From her toolkit, Sandra took her wristband and a data cable to connect it to the token. While she waited for decryption and copying of the token's log, Sandra picked up the box. The texture felt odd. It wasn't plastic after all, but polished wood. Metal brackets along each edge held it together. It had to be from Mars or Earth. Nobody who lived on a smaller rock would grow a tree to make ornaments. A little plaque on the top was inscribed with the letters AJ, short for Alejandro Jones. This might be something of sentimental value to his family. Sandra tucked it into one of her toolkit's pockets. Strange that these objects had been overlooked when the crew disembarked. The box shouldn't have been in this cabin at all, seeing as Jones wasn't an officer. Or was that why it had been missed? Sandra checked the remaining compartments, finding them empty. Her wristband was still busy with the log. The progress bar was stuck at 0. Pearson's hadn't taken this long to copy. Perhaps this token was an older model with a slower processor. Or perhaps Haldar had issued many more commands than Pearson. The AI interrupted her musings. "Inspector, you have a call from Kathy Ahuja at the TCMA. Put her through, please." Kathy's voice came from a speaker near the drawers. "Inspector Macris, what's this I hear about you receiving threatening letters?" "How did you find out about that?" Sandra asked. "The police told me. Listen, are you on board Gentoo now?" "Yes, why?" "I think you'd be safer on the ground." "Why? Do you think someone's going to lob a missile at me?" "No, but I'm nearly done here anyway. I should be back on the rock in half an hour or so." Kathy didn't answer. "Kathy, are you there?" Still no answer. Sweat pooled in the hollow of Sandra's back. In the silence, the soft whir of the air conditioning seemed to grow louder. "Gentoo, is there a problem with the call?" "I am very sorry, Inspector," the AI replied eventually. "External communications are offline." Okay, thanks for listening. I'm Stephen J. Pemberton. If you'd like to know more about my books, you can visit my website at www.pembers.net. Thanks.
Hello, thanks for joining me to watch this short video. My name is Arnie Harris. I'm a poet and author, and I've now written 2 books. The first one, which is this, and it's called The Messenger, was published in December 2019. And my second book, which I hope to have published in August of 2021, is still a work in progress. I'm not quite ready for publication. I would like to tell you a little bit about me and the book. So I will start by reading the blurb on the back of The Messenger. The Messenger is a collection of sincere, helpful messages which covers a variety of topics ranging from positivity, motivation and self-improvement to compassion, friendship and charity. The book includes important issues such as racial harmony, bullying, stress and depression, along with the author's thoughts on growing older, perseverance, gratitude and many other subjects. Presented in a unique style, the messages are easy to comprehend and can be used for encouragement and support, as well as for general advice on achieving a better and more contented life. This enjoyable read is about matters that are part of everyday living for many of us and seeks to show positive actions that could be put to use in order to improve any given situation. Therefore, the Messenger can be an invaluable friend to the readers at times of need or at important junctures in their lives. I'd like to read a poem that I placed in the introduction pages of The Messenger, which gives you a pretty good idea of how and when I started to write the positivity and motivational poetry. So this is called gratitude. Maybe I was dying. Of course I didn't know. My family were crying, afraid that I might go. I was lying prostrate, curtains round my bed. Don't know what was happening, don't know what was said. Apparently I struggled to claim another breath. Thankfully I found one to save me from my death. The team worked hard around me and fought for my existence. I couldn't battle much myself, for I had no resistance. Draining fluid from my lungs, they strove for my revival. Only one thing on their minds, ensuring my survival. The reason I've composed the words in all these written verses is to thank those people for my life, the doctors and the nurses. Thank you, I hope you like that one. The next one I'm going to read is actually the first one of the main part of the book in The Messenger. And it's quite a powerful, motivating message. And it's called The Raging Fire. There's a raging fire within my soul. The flames are getting higher. You cannot keep me from my goal. You can't quell my desire. You can snigger in my face or talk behind my back, but I know I will reach that place. Now I am on this track. There's a growing urge within my heart. I know it can't be halted. Attempts to pull my plans apart, be sure they will be thwarted. You can state it can't be done and say that I won't make it, but I have the will now I've begun. You really cannot break it. There's a power force within my brain and it cannot be denied. There's no one who could halt my train. You will not stop my ride. Anything you want to say, I have already heard. So whatever game you try to play, I will not be deterred. I've an inner strength and I know how to use it as I need. There's nothing that can stop me now. I know I will succeed. Thank you. And there's going to be just one more from this book. And this one is called A Better You. You don't need to be the greatest in all you undertake. You don't have to be the icing on everybody's cake. You don't need to be the top dog in everything you do. Just always try to be a better you. You don't need to be the smartest of everyone you meet. You don't need to see all people as those you have to beat. You don't need to fly much higher than anybody flew. Just always try to be a better you. You don't need to push yourself so hard to always top the pile. You don't need to win and at such cost that you forget to smile. You don't need to show you're brighter than everyone you knew. Just always try to be a better you. You don't need to be superior to all those who may know you. You don't need to reach the highest peak so others stay below you. You don't need to win each argument with different points of view. Just always try to be a better you. So that's that one. Now I briefly mentioned that I have a work in progress. The new book will be entitled The Positive Way. And just to give you a little flavour of what to expect, I'm just going to quickly read a couple of poems from that. Very much in the news lately is lots of stories about racial harmony and that type of thing. I've been writing that's about that subject for a few years now, and this one covers that type of story. This one's called Fellow Man. See how my arm extends, shaking the hands of friends. Colour of face, I don't care. All different shades of skin, only care what's within. That is where traits can compare. With thoughts that you must come first, progress could be reversed. Yet we could be one, side by side. Aiding minorities, fight inequalities, this could halt racism's tide. You are a special gem, but no more so than them. Do they deserve any less? Loving your fellow man, helping all where you can. These are some things to address. Whether you're black or white, treat one another right. That is what we must proclaim. No one's exterior makes them superior, so love all God's children the same. Thank you, and just one more before we end this short video. And the biggest news item of the last year and a half, obviously, is the pandemic and lockdown, and this is about that, and it's called Window. Staying inside, sit here and hide, watching the world through the window. No one's about, no going out, waiting while life is in limbo. Needing our hugs, talking of bugs, lockdowns beginning to tire us. Wanting some fun when this is done, we've all had enough of this virus. Missing our friends, no one pretends it's not been a tough situation. Over the moon we'll be quite soon and ready to book a vacation. We'll be all right, we see the light, no more restriction of movement. Hope for the best, that we'll be blessed with life that is full of improvement. Happy days near, till that day's here. Appreciative thoughts should be planted. Never forget, we must not let anything be taken for granted. Thank you. So that ends the reading that I wanted to do today. If you haven't already read The Messenger, it's available on Amazon, and keep an eye out for the imminent, or the August publication probably, of my second book, which is called The Positive Way. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Hi, I'm Jenny Clark, and this is the first virtual literary event I have participated in. So I want to say thank you to Elstree and Borehamwood Council for the invite. I think it's brilliant that we can connect with like-minded people despite the global crisis and despite distance. I live in France and have been adopted by the Facebook group Writers in the Wood. What a wonderful, friendly, supportive, creative group this is. And I thank them from the bottom of my heart, because it really helps to know there are people there ready to listen to triumphs and disasters, who understand what you're going through. I'm a multi-genre author, although I do tend to lean towards fantasy side of life, and I'm lucky to have my own writing hut, which has made a huge difference to my writing output. And I recommend a dedicated writing space to any writer. And if you need solitude to write, especially for you, and even if it's just a chair in a corner, if you only write in that space or do things writing related, then the moment you sit there, your brain clicks into writing mode. I have actually heard of several authors who work in cupboards, which seems a bit extreme to me, but then this isn't much bigger than a cupboard, so that's fine. And for those of you who write best when you're surrounded by other people, I do hope that your favourite cafes will be available for you soon. Behind me here are the books I've written, so let me introduce you to them. I have 2 volumes of Lunch It's Too Short for Long Stories. There are 60 flash fiction stories in each book. Each story is only 500 words long. Multi-genre stories. Most of them come with a bit of a twist, And the first volume, is free as an ebook on various sites. This is Colours of Rain. This is my middle grade fantasy, and it's set in a world where you only see colours when it rains. And April, the main character, and her two friends set off on April's 10th birthday to try and bring colours back to the world all the time. And I wrote this story with the adult in mind who might be reading it, as well as the child who might be listening, or the child that's reading it to themselves. Let me get them down. Ooh. I have A Handful of Stories, which is another collection of flash fiction written in 2020. It was a challenge to write a flash fiction story every day to a prompt. For those people who were unable to spend the time doing NaNoWriMo, I'll explain more about that NaNoWriMo later on. I have My Grandma's Fairy Tales, which is written by April, the main character from Colours of Rain. I've written Lessons from a Forest Garden, which are all the things my husband and I have learnt in the last 20 months while we've been setting up our forest garden. And these 3 books, plus another one called Nadia's Blog, are available to download for free from my secret library on my website. I am doing the final edits, the proofreading edit, on Intimate Lines, which is a woman's contemporary fiction, and on The Finder, which is a YA fantasy. Both of these are temporary covers, and both these books will be out this year, which is very exciting. I'm very excited about that. I have several books that I've written for early years practitioners in the UK. I'm writing a memoir of moving out here from the UK to France, where I eagerly followed my husband's dream, but found my own along the way. I'm also rewriting a middle grade trilogy called Dragon's Freedom, and I wrote the first book. This was the first completed novel that I wrote quite a few years ago. I have learnt so much since that it's being rewritten, and so volumes 2 and 3. I also have a vlog, a podcast, and I write a blog, and all of that's accessible through my website, jennyclark.com. And on my website there are links to all my books. You can read a sample, you can listen to a sample. I've also made a short video about the writing of Colours of Rain, so a little bit about the background, and I've written one on Lunch is Too Short for long stories too. So as you can tell, I'm pretty busy with my writing life, but I also spend time in my garden, cycle lots with my husband, work from home part-time, and I love to paint, draw and create. Now on my website I interview authors, and I thought it'd be fun to answer some of the questions I asked them for this literary event. So here goes. What aspect of the writing process do you enjoy the most? Oh, I love first drafting. It's fast and terribly messy, but I love becoming so immersed in the story, and I love the buzz from writing so many words in such a short time. I generally write a 100,000 word story in about 6 weeks. I don't make chapters, and I often write scenes in the wrong order. If I know that I'm writing a scene in the wrong place, I will use a different colour so it's easier to find later on. I don't worry about spelling or grammar or even tiny details. I often put name or describe the scenery or do some research in inverted commas, so I just don't stop the flow of the story, the ideas. And when I finish writing for the day, I always make a couple of ideas for what's coming next, so that I'm not tempted to look back at what I've written and edit. That would not be a good idea. Rewriting is always a bit of a nightmare, but this process works for me, and it came about from participating in NaNoWriMo. NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Month. It happens every November, where people from all over the world try and write a 50,000 word novel. It's supportive, it's fun, and it's really good for getting into a writing habit. What part of the story pushes into your imagination first? Well, for me, it's the idea, the essence of the story, and then the main character comes along. For example, in The Finder, my son was travelling in Nepal, and there was a terrible avalanche, and many Sherpas and tourists were killed. It had obviously evoked very strong emotions in me as I walked across the fields behind my house, and I cried for those who'd been lost and for those left behind. By the way, my son was fine. He wasn't in the mountains at that time. I thought about the search and rescue dogs that work in the mountains near my house, and I thought, what if someone had the ability to find people in this situation? And I took this idea and I popped it into my story stew pot and just left it to simmer, and after a few days Gracie turned up, and I just knew she was the main character and that she was a finder. How do you decide which story to write next? This is so hard for me. I have so many stories. I have stories waiting to be turned into first drafts. I have first drafts waiting to be rewritten. I guess it's the story that shouts the loudest, the one that pulls on my emotions and keeps me awake at night so I'm bleary-eyed and grumpy the next day. I know after finishing my memoir and editing the Dragon trilogy, there are 2 first drafts that I sort of feel I should be rewriting them. And they're both fun. One is a YA set in space. It's got a bit of romance and it's got a crazy answer to a scientific question. And there's a middle grade online gaming scenarios story which developed from an idea from a friend's son, and I really like the characters in that one. But for a few years now I've had a YA series dying to be written as a first draft. It's actually darker than anything I've written before. The scope of it is a 5-book series, and the number of characters scares me. But I love the concept behind it, so maybe I should find the courage. And then there's a one-off adult mystery idea, which is fascinating and probably quite apt due to the circumstances we're in at the moment. So you can see, for me, choosing the next story is very, very difficult. Do you have a piece of writing advice for anyone who'd like to start writing a novel? I do, and that's write it. And write what matters to you and finish it despite the nagging thoughts that will tell you to give up. Don't be afraid to write rubbish. Plot all over the place, doesn't matter. A minor character who wants to be the main character, not a problem. The story goes where you didn't plan, never mind. If it's written, it can be rewritten and edited and polished. I do hope you found this interesting and useful, and please enjoy the rest of the event. I know I will. And please do visit my website, jennyclarke.com. That's JennyClarke.com. Contact me if you have any questions or just want to connect, or even if you just want to pop into my secret library and download some free books. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.
Hi there, my name is Emily Madge Payne and I'm a children's author. I come from a small town originally in Beccles in the lovely Suffolk countryside. I'll get my words right. Yeah, I've currently got 4 books published, 3 in my Poetry Princess series, and I've recently released my newest book called Inner Buddy, which is a self-help book for children to help them manage their emotions. I started writing children's books after I had a bit of after I actually got ill in my life. I was working in the film and TV industry for about 10 years, working in the camera department as a clapper loader or a camera assistant, and unfortunately I got ME, which if you've ever worked in the film industry, you'll know that you work some very long days. So getting ME, feeling extremely tired and your body's in absolute agony from day to day, it just knocks you out and you can't continue. It was a really tough time for me because obviously the film industry was my main life, my career, and that kind of felt like just been taken away from me. And after spending about a week trying to relax and rest and trying to get better, if I could get better, because a lot of people told me that I won't recover from the ME, which scared me, I decided to actually go back to my writing. I'd recently started writing poetry and I'd written a poem called Fairy Tale. And I've always wanted to write a children's book and I wasn't really sure how to do it. And so because I didn't really have much energy and I was trying to sleep, but the bugbear with ME is that you feel exhausted, but I generally couldn't really sleep, which was not nice. So the energy that I did have, I used it to start writing a children's book. So I took my fairy tale poem and I started converting it into a little story, which was good fun. So I set myself a task each day to either write a verse or even a line, because that might have been all that I could do that day. And then once I got the story nailed and I was happy with it, I then started to illustrate the book as well. Fortunately, I'm no Van Gogh, but I got some really lovely comments on my illustrations. A lot of people said they look very childlike, so I'm unsure if that was a good thing or not, but I took it as a compliment because it suited the book, which is a bonus. So I worked for 6 weeks. So 6 weeks, I basically got up every day, set myself the target of either writing a verse, drawing an illustration, or just getting something done with the book. And then 6 weeks later, I had a full book with illustrations. And my dad just said about getting it printed, because I rang him and I just said, I can't really afford to do Christmas this year. So he said, why not just get your books printed and then gift everyone that as a Christmas present, which I thought was great. So I did that. I spent my last £50. I got 50 books printed and I was ready for Christmas. And then I did something that changed things quite dramatically for me and set me on the road to where I am today, which is obviously doing a career as a children's author. I posted the front cover of Fairy Tale onto my Facebook page, and to my shock, within 24 hours I'd sold I'd sold 25 of the books in pre-sales, and then within the next 48 hours I'd actually sold the next 25. So I'd sold all of my books within 48 hours, and I was then able to afford Christmas. So luckily for everyone else, they got proper Christmas presents that year. Some did actually get my fairy tale book, but for me it made me see that actually people really did want to see my writing, and that was just really inspiring, because after such a tough year, having the kind of rug pulled from out of my feet and having to give up a career that I really enjoyed, and thought that it would be the thing that I'd be doing for the rest of my life, and then to be able to fall into something else was really, really big. So that started me on the path to continuing to write. A lot of people got in touch with me who'd read the book and just said, when's the next book coming out? And I was just like, The Poetry Princess is only one story. So I had to start thinking of where The Poetry Princess could go and what the next story could be. And that was really good for me, because it led me to pen down 5 books in that series, and I've just finished writing book 4. It's been a little bit on the back burner because I felt that I needed to get In a Buddy out a bit sooner. So I'm hoping that the 4th Poetry Princess book, called Rule 10, will be out either later this year or early next year, which will be very cool, because it's an awesome adventure book, a coming of age about a young witch who has been prophesied to be the greatest witch of all time. And that is obviously the Poetry Princess, and she has to go on adventures. You see her coming of age with her learning how she learned her magic, and then you see her in different scenarios that most people would get into in different life events, and just see how she deals with them. And it's all got a funny kind of comical twist to it. So if you're looking for a classic fairy tale with a bit of a twist, these are definitely the right books for you. So that's The Poetry Princess, and that's how I got started as a children's author. Now, I have actually been writing In a Buddy, which is this lovely book here, for about 17 years, but I didn't realise, because when I was 17, I'm showing my age now, it's not good, I got told that I had an anxiety disorder, which was kind of a relief for me, because I just thought I'm just really panicking for absolutely no reason. But actually to have a name put to it was really great. But when I asked the doctor what they could do about it, they just said, you can either go on medication or you just have to get on with it. I was like, okay, is there a third answer? Can I deal with the anxiety? Can I get past it? Because it is really affecting my life. And they just said, no, you just have to live with it, just like the ME. But one thing I didn't finish off with that story is that actually I got past my ME. It took me about 1.5 years. I did a 28-day juice detox just after I'd released a fairy tale, before it went crazy on Facebook. And I did 28 days of juicing to cleanse my entire body of just fresh fruit and veg every single day. And it started me back on the path to recovery, and that massively helped me. And then about 1 year later, I was back working part-time, and I then started to climb the ladder in my new job, which I might tell you about at some point. So obviously for me, being told that you just have to live with it is not an answer that I like to take. So I ended up basically looking about what anxiety is for a start, because I didn't really know what it was. I just knew it just made me feel uncomfortable in certain situations. And then it just led me on to see if there was ways that I could deal with it, either remove it completely, or if I could then, or if I could sort it out in my life somehow. to be able or learn techniques that when I am feeling anxious, maybe a bit like now when I'm recording this, to help me feel a little bit calmer in myself. And on this, over this 17 years, I've read hundreds of books around it. I've done courses, I've listened to audio books, I've read ebooks, I've spoken to different mental health advisors, counsellors, psychologists, you name it, I've spoken to them, I've picked their brains. And I just thought, do you know what? I need to put all this down, because actually I got to the point in my life where I had my anxiety under control, which is fantastic. And I did it in some really cool ways. So because I'd started writing for children, and I knew that anxiety really can affect children at points, and obviously now with COVID, it was a real big deal for a lot of children, anxiety and just feeling scared of being out and about, which is totally understandable. I mean, because us adults were feeling quite scared. So I thought I would get in a buddy penned and get that written with my kind of top techniques that I use every single day that always help me with my anxiety. And I put them together in a little storybook. So In a Buddy is written in a diary format, and it's got the techniques throughout the story. So when children are reading the story, they can basically read through the story, but then once they get to the technique, they can do the technique along with the characters. So then they're learning as they're going, and by doing that, it's helping them massively. So then when they get to the end of the book, they have all of these brilliant skills in place. So when they are faced with a difficult situation or a scenario where they're feeling uncomfortable, they have a technique that they can just go to. And all of the techniques in a buddy are ones that you can do anywhere. So you don't need to be sat down doing these techniques. You can actually be anywhere out and about, which is the great thing with them, because it means that wherever you are, you can go, right, this is my favourite technique from the book, I will just use that. I'll show you a little bit. My favourite one is this one, which is the gratitude journal. I think that gratitude is the number one thing, especially when you're dealing with anxiety. And also if you're feeling low as well, because it is your baseline. Because if you can practice the attitude of gratitude, it means that when you do kind of maybe have a bit of a fall from grace, as we do, because life is not just going along in a straight line, it is peaks and troughs. When you do have that kind of dip, you can fall back on the gratitude technique, and it'll help you to bounce back in a happier and more positive way, and it'll help you to see different things in life that you maybe didn't see before. So obviously throughout In a Buddy there is different characters. You've got In a Buddy, which is your intuition, which you can see. So you have In a Buddy, which is your intuition. And as I always say, always follow your intuition, because it will lead you to some amazing places. The other character that we have that's mainly very prominent is our bad manners. And bad manners is what probably some people call your ego, or your negative voice, that basically gets in the way and upsets you, tells you that you're daft and silly. And In a Buddy is there basically to show you how to get bad manners under control, and show you that actually bad manners isn't a bad character and that you don't need to eradicate them. It's just that they're there actually to help you and to keep you safe, because that's what your brain is designed to do. So obviously In a Buddy has got a wealth of techniques from the 17 years of research and doing what I call is the toddler test, because whenever you get an anxiety technique or anything like that, I do the toddler test on it, which is I try and break it, and I will use it as much as I possibly can to the point where it should break. And if it doesn't, it goes in my, yep, that's a keeper pile. If it does break, then we have to reevaluate it and see where it could fit. But that's how that's how the story is kind of developed in that way. So I wanted to put that book together to help children to be able to express themselves and show them that every emotion is valid and it's okay if you're upset or angry. Be upset and angry. You don't need to be happy 24/7, and it's physically impossible to be happy 24/7. I do try, but yeah, it doesn't always end well. But that's my kind of story around being a children's author. If you would like to know more about what I do, you can find me either on Facebook, which is just under Inner Buddy, or you can head to my website, which is just www.innerbuddy.com. You can drop me an email on madge@innerbuddy.com. You can also find my Inner Buddies Inspiring Stories podcast, where I've been interviewing a range of different people who have inspiring stories, who are just everyday people that have gone through something and they've come out the other side and they just wanted to share their story. And you can find that podcast just by searching on any of the big podcast networks like iTunes, Spotify, Deezer, things like that. You can, how else can you find me? There's lots of ways you can find me. You can also check out my blog, which I post 3 times a week, on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, which lands on my Facebook, or you can find that on my website. And also, Inner Buddy is actually currently up for an award, which is very, very cool. It's a Reader's Choice Award, and if you'd like to vote for it, you can just head to the website and drop me a nice little vote, and fingers crossed we can win. But it's been an insane 6 years, which is surprising. So 6 years has led to quite a lot of things happening. And to actually, in the last few months, to find out that Inner Buddy, my first ever book, to be put up for an award, starting from where I started, like I said before, with having to deal with ME and then having to start rebuilding my life basically from scratch, to then go from that to now working full time, top of my department, and then also having my 4th book up for an award is absolutely insane. So yeah, it's been an epic journey, and I look forward to continue to inspiring more people and more children. And also I've had the opportunity, even though I'm self-published, I don't have a big publisher behind me, I've been able to give away nearly 200 copies of Inner Buddy to schools, homeschooling bodies, youth groups across the UK, which has been absolutely fantastic, and I've been having some really lovely feedback off that. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me. Hopefully my story inspired you, and yeah, please get writing. It's a fantastic way to express yourself. One of the ways that I really enjoy expressing myself is through writing. And yeah, take care. Thank you. Bye.